right, welcome everybody. My name is Amy Patterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, which is the umbrella organization for Connecticut's land conservation community, working most predominantly with the state's land trusts. I also wear the hat of being the chair of the Natural Heritage, Open Space, and Watershed Land Acquisition Review Board, which is a statutorily created advisory board to the Land and Acquisition Management Office at DEEP. And our charge is to advise the agency on those two programs, the Rec and Natural Heritage Trust Program, which is DEEP's source of funding for its own conservation acquisitions, as well as the Open Space Grant Program and the Urban Green and Community Garden Program. But we also get into more policy matters like the Green Plan. And so with both the OSWA and Urban Green applications due in October, the next round due in October, and the Green Plan slated for revision, we agreed that it would be terrific to start offering ongoing opportunities for members of the public to hear more about these programs and have an opportunity to ask questions and to comment. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this program over to Lindsay Soar. These August sessions, as you know, they're only an hour. So they really are meant to be very short on presentation to give as much time as possible to all of you to ask questions, provide your input, and probably give DEEP and CLCC, for that matter, some takeaways to follow up on and then comment on through this ongoing process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay Soar. And take it away, Lindsay. But thanks for coming, everybody. And again, this is only an hour, so we will try to provide you with as much time as possible on your questions. And feel free to use the chat function for that purpose, by the way.
Can you see that, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. As Amy said, Lindsay Soar, I'm the Office Director for the Land Acquisition and Management Office. And we handle both the Open Space Grant Program and the Urban Green and Community Garden Program, as well as acquisitions across DEEP. So, whoops, where's the... Okay, so I'm just going to give a little history on the Green Plan. So back in the late 90s, the General Assembly recognized, the threats of landscape changes, of development, and so they decided to set an acreage goal for land protection across Connecticut. As many of you know, that's 21% of the land across Connecticut for open space by 2023. So we are in 2023, so I'm sure people are curious where we are in terms of that goal. That goal set 11% for partners, and partners include land trusts, municipalities, water companies, and other conservation organizations that are also protecting land, and then 10% of that land for DEEP. So this is set in statute, and we've been working towards that goal since 1997. The Green Plan is also by statute, and so the statute required the development of the Green Plan. I think they didn't make it mandatory until 2012, something like that. But in 2001, the partners, including all municipalities, conservation organizations, worked together to develop the first. There's been a few updates since then, but the last one was 2016 to 2020. And as you can imagine, 2020 was a bit of a crazy year for everybody. With COVID and with lots of retirements within DEEP, the next update has not happened yet, but we are moving it forward now, and so we're hoping for your help as we move it forward. So as I said before, 21% is the goal. We currently say that we've protected 76.67%. I don't know why we get so accurate with a percentage when the data is not really that accurate. So the 10% from the state, we have pretty good tracking, obviously, on the parcels and the properties that DEEP has acquired over the years. So those numbers are pretty accurate, and we're in like the 75% range for protection towards our goal. But for the conservation partners, for the last about 20 years, we've only been tracking, the parcels we know about, and then the parcels that get protected through the Open Space Grant Program. And so we know that a ton of conservation is happening in municipalities and through land trust that does not come through our grant program. So we anticipate that, you know, if we did a data collection, that the numbers would be quite a bit closer to the 21% goal. I would even venture to say maybe we've reached it if you were going to look at open space numbers, but that's to be determined in the future. So what we found is that across, you know, the statute, there was no definition of open space. So there was no set way that we were tracking. There was no set way that municipalities and land trusts and planning organizations were looking at open space. So each town, each region, we're doing it slightly different. And so numbers weren't, you know, could not necessarily be compared. A lot of places over the years have done only open space that have no structures or have no infrastructure on them. But the open spaces that are used by in communities across Connecticut, we know are vast. People are using, you know, places that have playground equipment, but they're also using, you know, vacant land that's for hiking trails. So we wanted to capture, and I worked with Amy and other members of the review board in a subcommittee to try to start to draft what maybe an open space definition would look like. We wanted this to be all encompassing for the purposes of this 21% goal. And one caveat I would say is that the way this definition is written, it's a moment in time. So it's, you know, it's tracking things that are used as open space right now, but maybe they don't have full protection and could be vulnerable to changes in use. So I wanted to stop here. I want people to take a look at this, to raise their hands, to ask questions. I really want this to be a back and forth so you guys can, you know, we can further tweak this before we get to a final definition of what we're going to use in this next green plan. We really wanted to bring it, you know, to the land trusts, to the regional planning groups, to the conservation organizations, so you can, you know, have a say in what goes forward for this. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to let you take it in, and then I'm welcoming questions and comments from people if you want to raise your hands.
Lindsay, maybe while everybody's looking over this, and I apologize if you already went into this a bit more, but if you could talk about the green plan itself and the revision process, and how this definition, just while folks are looking at it, how it was developed as part of the green plan revision process.
Yeah, so as I was saying before, the one thing was that the statute didn't define open space. So we wanted to make sure that, and we were looking at open space and collecting data. My hope is to hire a consultant to use this definition, whatever we come up with, to collect data across Connecticut and have a better understanding of where we are with that 21%. And so as we went into it as a group, it's actually funny. We had many conversations back and forth. We actually played a game of, is this open space, to try to determine what folks really, you know, thought of as open space, and what could be included in this and what would be left out of this if we went with this definition. So we had a lot of back and forth, and for the green plan, I think this is going to be the basis for our understanding of what the open space field looks like across the whole state. And then we'll use it to set new goals for this next update of the green plan. Maybe it's new acreage goals, maybe it's access goals, maybe it's regional goals. Haven't decided that yet, but I think this will be a key piece in deciding how we move forward with the green plan. Does that answer your question, Amy?
It does. And folks, I encourage you to raise your hand, you know, now and throughout this presentation. You could also put some questions in the chat, not only about the open space definition, but also the context in which it's been developed. And that would be in the context of the green plan. And if you have questions about the green plan, this is a good place to start asking them, because again, it's a process that's going to unfold as we move along in the next months and year. I'm going to put a link to the information about the green plan that's on the DEEP website in the chat for you as well. I also did put a link to the review board, some information about the review board. Those meetings that we have once a month are open to the public, and the green plan process will be part of our ongoing discussions as DEEP gets that underway. So
It looks like there might be one question from Rod in the chat.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Lindsay.
So, Rod, I don't know if you wanted to unmute, but are you asking, could it also include these areas?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I there? Oh, great. I'm glad. Yeah, I was just hoping that at some point you could include either discussion or the inclusion in number 2 of natural area reserves or preserves, and also the preservation of only 1% of our old growth forests are left in the Northeast.
So interesting. It's actually something we battled back and forth, not really battled, but had multiple conversations back and forth on whether this definition should be what we want to conserve as open space, or what we're going to consider is currently open space in Connecticut. And so for the purposes of the 21%, we went with what are we going to currently, say is open space. I do think those natural area preserves and old growth forests, if they meet this qualification, they're going to be considered open space based on this definition. And in the green plan, there will be multiple discussions of the types of properties moving forward that we would want to preserve as open space. So I think natural area preserves, I think old growth forests, I think forests in general, there will be discussions in the new update to the green plan that talks about, why and what areas we would want to see protected in the future. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you. And just so you know, it doesn't have to be existing old growth, but it could be put aside. A core forest, unfragmented area could be put aside to eventually be old growth in perpetuity.
Yep. Kyle, your question on municipalities considered qualified conservation organization. Yes, so that's one of the definitions that I have. Yeah, you can see like little numbers. So I have a further explanation of this open space definition. And originally we had pulled out government entities, but then when you look at the statute that defines qualified conservation organization, government entities, land trusts, conservation organizations are all included in that. So municipalities would definitely be in that. Okay, well, if there aren't any further questions on this, we can come.
Can you hear me?
Someone
This
there.
is Erin O'Hare. Can I talk?
Yep.
Oh, can you see my chat? I'm new to chats. I don't know how to send it. I typed it. How do I send it to you? I typed it in the chat box.
If you just press enter, it should pop
Everyone?
Yep, to everyone. If you just press enter, after you type it in, press enter, and hopefully it'll pop up.
Enter on my
On your keyboard.
Okay, enter on the keyboard.
Right.
Did that send it to you? No.
I'm not seeing it yet. But Erin, why don't you go ahead and just pose your question or your comment?
So my comments were, it doesn't seem to include in the definition critical habitats. And my other, I've got a lot of them. So, okay, how do I get rid of this? So I can read my own chat. It's now in front of the chat. Let me get rid of it. Okay. Does a municipality, is a municipality a quote qualified conservation organization by your definition? Is it?
Yeah, so for those first two, and Kyle had asked that question before, qualified conservation organization, the definition by statute talks about government entities, land trust, conservation organizations. So municipalities would be included in that. I would say critical habitats gets covered if has a conservation easement, or it's owned by one of those organizations. to maintain or enhance conservation of natural or scenic resources. So I would say that if those areas are owned by or have a conservation easement over them, they would be included in this. I think that also goes towards that same discussion. Critical habitat is something that we will fully flesh out and discuss in the next iteration of the green plan, to say those are the types of areas for future protection that we want to see become open space. Hopefully that makes sense.
Again, I think that the distinction, it's really critical to understand, because I was one of those review board members that really struggled with this. And that is, that the purpose of this open space definition, and this is why we wanted to present it to the public and get this input, is to try and get a handle on what is considered open space, whether it's legally protected or not. So to try to get a handle on what municipalities and the state are really looking at as open space. And then once getting a handle on that, to assess its vulnerability, because if it's not legally protected, it is vulnerable. And then when we're developing,
it won't go.
Erin, I'm gonna mute you if that's okay.
Oh,
all right?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to send my chat. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm
And then as part of the green plan process, like Rod's comment and what Erin just said, and looking at what do we want to protect, what's vulnerable to conversion, and what do we want and need to protect in order to best advance our land conservation and environmental goals here in Connecticut. So this definition on its face might seem to leave out those areas that we aspire to protect, but the purpose here is to get a handle on what's being considered open space, so then we can then put those other pieces in place moving forward.
Yeah. And before we go to Rob, because he has his hand raised, but to the last part of your question, Erin, about.
Oh, Lindsay, I'm sorry, you're muted. Lindsay, you need to unmute. That was my fault. No, that was me. I was muting myself.
Oh, I was like, wait, how did I get muted?
That was my fault. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, to the last point of Erin's question about, town open space not having conservation easements, we are fully aware of that. And so, as Amy was saying, this definition is, in this moment of time, what do the residents of Connecticut use as open space? It doesn't have to be fully protected. It doesn't have to have a conservation easement on it. That's one of the qualifications for the beginning, but it can also be just owned by a municipality, and it can be, used for one of the uses below. So for instance, a municipal park that has no restrictions on it could potentially fit this definition and be considered open space. And next year, the town could decide to make it a school. We fully recognize that, and we know that's the case with this definition. And my further slides, I'm going to talk about vulnerability and how we're going to try to collect data on that as well, to understand what's being used as open space, and then what's being used as open space and how vulnerable is it to conversion to some other use. And so that will get at, some spaces might need more protection to ensure that they remain open space for the future. So Rob has his hand up. I don't know if you want to unmute and ask a question.
I think I'm unmuted. So I guess the question I have is, one of the things Audubon does, we have, and both Audubons and other bird conservation organizations are involved in something called important bird areas. And those important bird areas might include private property, municipal property, state property. They're identified in sort of as a function of habitat. So I guess my question would be, would you consider adding, use protected for the following purposes? And I would ask that maybe you add important bird habitat. And I think it does go to the issue that I see here. I mean, you talk about conservation of natural scenic resources and not really more specific to ecosystems and ecosystem protection. And I think that's what I'm looking to maybe have a little bit, maybe perhaps, maybe highlighted a little bit more in that second part of the definition. I think and I'll just make this other comment and you can do what you need, but I think the point here is when you start talking about conservation conservation of wetlands, beaches, and tidal marshes. We do a lot of work at Audubon in that. What we're finding is there's marsh migration. So something that might not be currently a wetland or a beach or a tidal marsh may become one into the future because of sea level rise. So I would say promote the conservation of future, both current and future wetlands, beaches, and tidal marshes. I mean, just to put the idea that beaches and tidal marshes will expand and they will change their shape and form.
Yeah.
And I just would put that, those are the 2 points I'm making: important bird areas and the notion that that you're going to see some changes over time as a result of climate change. Those are my points. Thanks.
So those two, thank you for that. I think those two, and we might be able to flesh out a little bit more in number 2, some of the specific resources that we're looking to protect. Maybe that's something we can work on. But I would say that both important bird habitat and marsh migration will be things we're thinking about when we're saying in the future, these are places we want to see protected. And those will be high on the list for potential state acquisitions and, for funding through DEEP to make sure that local organizations are also protecting those areas.
That's awesome. Thank you. Great. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Other questions? I'm looking for some hands up. Let's see.
There is one in the chat and it says in number 1, does this exclude private unrestricted land? And I would say yes, because at this point we're saying that private unrestricted land, and we had this discussion a little bit about PA 490, which is our tax classification that allows landowners to pay at current use values instead of at highest and best use values. And so we talked about land in that program, and we also talked about association land, which may be kind of set aside from an association and it's not developed. But our feeling, we went back and forth a little bit, but I guess our feeling was that those uses were more for private and secondary were for open space. And so they would not be included in this definition. I would say that there is no way to make this perfect. we keep going back and forth. So we can keep tweaking and thinking through ways that we could make it better. And we'll have discussions on some of these things as move forward.
And again, this definition is to try and get a handle on what is being considered open space and then what is most vulnerable to conversion. And it's not getting to what the state aspires to protect moving forward, which will get fleshed out in the green plan and perhaps captured in a statutory definition, which we don't really have. Lindsay, do you have more slides here then that you want to start to move forward with?
I do.
Keep watching. Okay, I'll keep watching for questions.
Okay. And we tried to define as many terms as we could that might be slightly confusing, but like Aaron wrote, can you define natural streams? That's something we can go back and try to pull and do a definition for. After this, Amy will have the list of participants so she can send out, this definition comes with a further explanation and the definitions. And so she can send that out to everybody so you can fully see what we have been working on in this definition. Okay, so next slide. So this is something that we've touched on a little bit already, but as we were going through this, we were saying, okay, so that municipal property that has no conservation easement on it, that could be, transferred to another use at any point really without legal protections. That is an open space area or a piece of property that's currently being used as open space that is vulnerable. And so that's something we want to collect. When we collect the data, we really want to understand that. So we kind of categorized, we made high, low, and virtually no vulnerability. And the way we kind of define that was virtually no would be conservation easement or restriction on it. That made it very difficult, if not impossible, to convert property to something else. Low would be something that maybe has some grant restrictions on it, or it has, it's owned by deep or a land trust. And so we have policies in place that make it very difficult for these lands to be converted. And then high vulnerability would be municipal lands or water company lands that are classified as class 3. Those could be transferred to another use relatively straightforward. So we went back and forth on how we did this, but I think one of the ways that we're going to truly understand what the landscape of open space looks like in Connecticut is to collect everything that's being used as open space that fits that definition, and then to have vulnerability categories that we could display on a map and show these lands, although they have open space lands, all of their open space lands are vulnerable, right? So we need to maybe work with those organizations to get conservation easements or to protect some other way lands in some of those communities where there's very little fully protected open space. So our goal is, once we do this, we're going to hire a consultant to collect data on the current state using this definition, and then also the vulnerabilities across the state, so we can get kind of the full landscape of what the open space world looks like in Connecticut right now. So I don't know if there are questions on that. If not, I will keep going. I don't have the chat open right now, Amy.
Yeah,
so
I'm
we
looking
can...
at it. I don't see anything. I don't see any new questions in the chat, and I'm not seeing any hands up. But if your hand is up and I'm missing it because I'm looking at 3 different here, just unmute yourself and dive in. If we have too many people talking, I'll take care of that. But if there's any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in. But this is really going to what we were talking about before, which is it's kind of this process of saying, all right, broadly, what's open space, what's vulnerable to conversion, and then as DEEP starts to draft the green plan, is to identify the high priority properties through some of the important bird areas. For example, I see Robert's hand up, and some of the other criteria that have been pointed out through this discussion and others, and making sure that we are setting the goals in that green plan to conserve those areas. Robert?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to follow up on the consultant and what they were planning to do. I don't know where this stood, but I remember, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years ago, there was a movement to try and map a number of open spaces. That was supposed to happen on a regular basis. I don't know whether that ever moved forward at the department. My sense is there was never ever any funding for it. Are we now in a situation where you're actually going to get some funding to have a consultant actually help us identify this? That sounds like really good news.
Yeah, so that program was called the Protected Open Space Mapping Program. And I want to say it was completed to what it is now in 2009 or 10, and has not been updated since then. There was a grand plan that it would be continuously updated, but it was on a voluntary basis, so it just never really materialized, and we didn't have the staff or resources to keep up with it. So yes, this consultant, we have funding to hire a consultant for this green plan, I would say. As I said before, what they collect is going to be a moment in time. I'm going to try to work in somehow, working with the municipalities or the planning organizations to have a continuous update, but I don't think that will be as easy to accomplish as having the consultant do it at this moment in time for 2023 into 2024. So,
and I don't want to get in too deep in the weeds, but it's just a question. So are you going to be looking at geospatial data, like trying to use satellite data to try and help you on this, or are you going to look at some other mechanism? And then the other thing I would encourage you to take a look at as you start to do this is to take a look at the stream flow regulations and the stream flow mapping that was done. It's actually quite good. There's a lot of really good resources in there about spaces that should be open, class 1, class 2, class 3. There's some really good work done there. It's worth taking a look at. I'll try and follow up with Mary Becker, I think, did a lot of the work on that, and she's in the water division. So really someone that'd be a really good connection, I think.
Yeah, any resources like that would be wonderful. We will be doing it mostly, I think, it's going to be a large project. I've left kind of long period of time for the consultant to do this. I think the initial review will be based on town GIS land records data that is, you can get through each town, or mostly the COGs have it. And that'll be the initial go. They'll create kind of a draft, and then working with both land trusts and municipalities and planning agencies, kind of go through like a cull. Does this look accurate? What are we missing? What do we need to add to this based on this open space definition to get the final? It'll never be perfect, but I think we're trying to get closer to what the landscape looks like than we currently have mapped right now.
Before I get, there's a comment and a question, and just there's also just as to Robert's question, statutorily, there was a mandate to establish a public use benefit land registry, and that was to start mapping the state properties, and then from then on it would be other designated open space areas. And I think DEEP is still working. It hasn't really gotten that far on the state, starting with the state parks and the state forests, and then we'll get to the open space, the Oswald grant properties, et cetera. So that's yet another mapping effort in the state that was established by statute, but it hasn't gotten far, mostly because DEEP hasn't had the resources to be able to do it. Rob Parley had added a comment here. Apparently Connecticut has 18% open space, the least in New England. Lindsay, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, that's probably based on the numbers that we have been collecting. I mean, we're saying we're 76, about 76% to our 21% goal. So that's probably, it's pretty accurate. But as I said before, the data that we've been collecting from partners is not accurate. So we might be closer to 21%. We might be over 21% once we see what municipalities and land trusts have actually been, collecting or protecting over the years. So Aaron is asking about the consultant. It is definitely a very difficult task. I don't disagree with you, but I think the first go is going to be using what's out there now for land records information via GIS. And we have gotten, in the last 10 years, leaps and bounds better in Connecticut. Most towns, if not all, now have GIS information. It's not 100% accurate because it's based on assessor's maps, but I think it's going to get us closer to what we're looking for. And so they can check, a GIS consultant can, categorize and pull stuff based on ownership data, and then they can work with the COGs, the municipalities, and the land trust to better understand what these properties were categorized at and pulled for and protected for.
Thanks.
So
Lindsay.
it's not going to be easy, but I think it can be done and done better than it's currently being done.
Okay. Kyle has written in on behalf of the Southeast COG. They have just finished their inventory, and as Lindsay had said, many of the COGs are working on open space mapping, and he has generously offered to share the result of their effort down there in Southeast COG with the consultant. That's great, Kyle. Thank you.
And then Phil, I don't know if you wanted to unmute and.
I'm unmuted. I got a very small semantic point. When I looked at this vulnerabilities, the third bullet point being categorization, I saw high, low, but I was taken aback when I realized that high means bad. I think presentationally,
I hear you.
It's desirable that high mean good. And one simple suggestion would, instead of calling it vulnerability, call it protection status. So high means good and low means bad, but take that for what it's worth.
Gotcha. That's a good point.
Excellent. Thank you, Phil. Nancy Leach, did you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Nancy, but it looked like you had unmuted. So I thought maybe you would try to jump in with a question.
No jumping over here, just listening.
Okay. Okay.
And Rod, thank you for the wildlands and woodlands. have looked through. It's a great resource to be using for something like this. Okay, I have I think one more slide, and then we can open it up to even more questions if want. Oh, two more. So this is a rough timeline. The hope is that we will finish up this open space definition. We'll take, responses from you guys, any input from the communities, tweak it some more, finalize it by the end of August, be putting out requests for proposals into September for a consultant, and then they will be hired and hopefully work through next spring to collect the data for this project. And then after that data is collected, goal setting and starting to draft in the spring, late spring. And the hope is that by this time next year or end of August next year, we'll have a first draft for public input. We're going to have multiple, I think, meetings and conversations about it throughout that time. And then we'll have comments and final report, hopefully by the end of 2024 is my goal. Things obviously can always change, but I think the end goal is still December 2024. And if things change, within that, that's always possible. And then my last slide is just how can you help? So the comments you're providing today on the definition, anything that you can send afterwards, any existing plans or data that you know about that would help, always, attending future input sessions. And as you're, doing your everyday work, if there's things that, pop up that you think might be useful for the green plan, please, send them my way, send them to Amy, send them to us to start incorporating into our drafting, to our goals, to our data collection as we keep going.
And I would add to that, what CLCC is always asking is what assistance do you need, whether it's technical or financial, to advance your community's land conservation goals. And, the best plans are the most specific plans. And while the green plan is advisory in nature, the more specific we can make it and have very discrete recommendations that can be measured, the better. And so we want to help funnel that information too deep so that this plan can be as useful as possible. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us at CLCC or to Lindsay directly with those types of requests. This is what we need. If our community is going to move forward with its land conservation work, our land trust is going to be able to meet its goals, we need X, Y, and Z.
Yep. So I'll put my contact information up here if you want to email me. That's probably the best way to reach out to me. And, anything you have, questions, comments, there's nothing that's, nothing that's silly. I'm happy to hear and respond to anything anybody sends. So feel free to send it my way. And then, opening it up to additional questions, comments at this point. And we're at the start and we're hoping we'll continue to move forward into 2024.
Lindsay, do you want to stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody? And then if somebody has a specific question that requires us to pull it back up, we can. But any other questions, comments, anything else? I will tell you, I want to give a shout out to Lindsay and land acquisition management folks. I know that Allison is here. I also noticed that a bunch of our review board folks are here. Again, we're here to provide you with assistance. Always contact me at CLCC. I can bring comments to the review board. And also you can come to a review board meeting. If you go to the link that I had provided for the review board, we meet the second Thursday of every month at 10:30 via Zoom. Very easy to participate. We do have a public input session. You can listen in and then make your comments. So I encourage you to do that. The more voices that we hear, the better.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Otherwise, you have another additional, 15 minutes for your lunch. Go outside. It's gorgeous.
Hey, Amy, I just wanted to comment
Yeah.
quickly. So I just wanted to thank Lindsay and the department for making this a priority. And I know, Amy, you've been putting pressure on everybody to do this for some time, which is great. And I think that's the benefit of advocacy. The thing I want to just reach out to and say is, I think it's great that you're actually taking the time to focus on this. It's really important. I don't think more important at any time than in the past. So thank you for making the effort, and anything we can do to help continue to make certain you have the right resources you need to do it, let us know. And I'll follow up with you directly on some of the stream flow and other things. But thank you. This is an important effort, and I want to give you guys credit for that. Thank you.
Thank you,
That's
Robert.
great.
Lindsay,
And then, yep.
you mentioned hiring a consultant to gather data and prepare a report. It's probably obvious, but I'd just like confirmation that that report will include maps and graphics, ideally maps that are available online.
Yep.
And I assume you've got people in-house that can do that, but
So I think the main output from the consultant will probably be GIS data and mapping, and it will be used in the upcoming green plan. So it will definitely be published at some point for the public consumption.
okay, thanks.
And I would assume once we, we haven't gotten that far yet because Amy and I are, putting out fires daily, but we'll have a schedule of kind of green plan input sessions in the future. And, as we move forward with the consultant, after we have some of that information, getting input from all of you on what we're seeing, what we're collecting is going to be important. So we'll be reaching out on that as well.
I just put CLCC's website in the chat, the link to our website in the chat. And if you're not, most of you probably are already receiving our emails, and that's why you're here, but maybe you heard about this from somebody else. But in any event, just be sure you're on our distribution list, because we will be working very closely with Lindsay and her office in offering these ongoing information sessions, because the more the more participation we get from the public, the better this plan is ultimately going to be and most applicable to your land conservation work. Aaron, we see your question there. Where's it explained written that a municipality is a qualified conservation organization? Lindsay, you want to address that again? And we'll follow up.
Yeah, so I only pulled out a subset of the open space definition, kind of full sheet of how we've been outlining this. And so the full sheet has the definitions, and after this meeting, Amy has a group list of who attended, so we can, or who registered, so we can send out, a PDF of that. So you can see the definition, the explanation, and the definitions all in one place, and see where that's defined.
And we're going to develop a web page that's just going to have an ongoing list of the resources that come out of each of these sessions. And so we'll keep adding to that, and we'll get that up there. So again, if you just follow the emails that we send out, the e-newsletters, even if they're not specifically directed to you, we will always publish resources as we add them. And you can always contact me if you can't find something. Anything else? Any other questions? Comments? All right. Well, it is 12:59. We did great with time here. Lindsay, thank you so much again. Land Acquisition Management has been a longtime partner, of course, with all of us that do land conservation work. Having Lindsay at the helm has just been a terrific breath of fresh air for us. And to echo Robert's sentiments, I mean, this is going to be the most open process, I think, that we've ever had. And that's saying a lot, because DEEP has always worked hard to do it. And make sure that the public can participate. But now you really will have an opportunity to follow along and add your comments and make sure that your voices are heard. So thanks everybody for coming, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.